The night was cold and silent, broken only by the faint hum of a damaged engine far above the ruined battlefield. Ashes floated in the air, and the land was covered in the wreckage of metal ships, burned weapons, and shadows of a war long lost. A lone human walked carefully among the debris, his boots crunching against shattered stone. His name was Daniel, a simple traveler who had come searching for supplies in the forgotten wasteland. He had no idea that this night would change his life forever. As he searched through a broken shuttle, he heard a soft sound, almost like a whimper. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again, a small cry. Weak and filled with fear, his heart froze, and he turned quickly, his flashlight cutting through the dust and smoke. There, half hidden under a piece of metal, was a child. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly in the darkness, and her eyes were larger than any human child's, shining with a strange golden light. She was trembling, clutching a piece of cloth tightly in her small hands. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "An alien child," he whispered under his breath, shocked by the sight. For a moment, he wanted to walk away, to pretend he had not seen her. The galaxy was dangerous, and humans who interfered with alien matters often paid the price. But then the child looked up at him, her golden eyes wide with fear and pain, and in that moment, Daniel felt something stir deep inside him. He knelt down slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said gently, though he knew she might not understand his words. The girl pressed herself tighter against the wreckage, but her tiny fingers loosened their grip on the cloth. Daniel saw now that the cloth bore strange markings, glowing symbols that pulsed faintly. He had no idea what they meant, but they felt important. The child's breathing was weak, and her movements slow. She was hungry, tired, and afraid. Daniel sighed, knowing what he had to do. Against his better judgment, against all logic, he could not leave her here. He reached out carefully, and after a long pause, the child let him lift her into his arms. She was light, far too light for her age, and he could feel the faint beat of her heart against his chest. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped her in it, shielding her from the cold wind. Her golden eyes never left his face, watching him with a mix of fear and fragile trust. Daniel looked around one last time, making sure no one was watching. The battlefield was empty, silent except for the distant rumble of thunder. He carried her back to his small ship, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? And why was she left alone among the ruins? Why did she carry cloth with glowing markings? And why did her eyes shine like stars? But deep down, Daniel knew there would be no easy answers. When he reached the safety of his cabin, he laid her gently on a blanket. The child curled into the warmth, her small hands gripping his sleeve as if afraid he would disappear. Daniel sat beside her, silent. He had lived alone for years, drifting from world to world with no family, no purpose, and now, without warning, fate had placed this fragile life in his hands. Outside, far beyond the clouds, ships moved silently through the stars. They were searching, hunting, following faint signals that pointed toward the lost child. Daniel had no idea that by saving her, he had stepped into a storm that could shake the galaxy. The girl's golden eyes closed slowly, and she drifted into sleep. Daniel sat awake, staring at the glowing cloth, wondering what secrets it carried. He did not know that the child he had rescued was no ordinary orphan. She was a missing heir, a princess of an empire he had never even heard of, and the war that had left her stranded was far from over. As thunder rolled across the sky and lightning lit the wreckage outside, Daniel realized one thing clearly: his life was no longer his own. The moment he lifted that child from the ashes, his destiny had changed forever. The storm raged outside. As Daniel's small ship lifted off from the ruined battlefield, the engines groaned, the panels rattled, but the vessel managed to cut through the heavy clouds. Inside, the girl slept wrapped in his jacket, her small hands gripping the cloth with glowing markings. Daniel stole glances at her, unsure if he had made the right choice. He had no plan, No idea what to do with a child who was not even human, but something about her silence, her fragile trust, made him feel he could not abandon her. The galaxy was wide, cruel, and filled with predators. If he left her, she would not survive, and Daniel knew it. When they landed on a quiet colony world, the sky was painted with two suns, one golden and one pale white. Daniel lived in a small outpost on the edge of the settlement. It was not much. Just metal walls, old machines, and shelves filled with scrap he had collected over the years. But for the girl, it would have to be home. The first days were difficult. She did not speak his language, and her eyes always followed him with suspicion. She would not eat the food he offered, only staring at the strange colors of human meals. Daniel tried everything, even cooking old recipes he remembered from childhood. Finally, she accepted a small piece of bread, nibbling like a frightened animal. At night, she cried softly when she thought he was asleep. Her glowing eyes shimmered in the darkness, reflecting the pain of someone who had lost too much too soon. Daniel wanted to comfort her, but he did not know how. Instead, he sat near her bed, silent, keeping watch, until her sobs turned to steady breathing. Slowly, the walls between them began to break. One morning, she touched his hand while he was fixing a broken engine. Her fingers were small, but her touch was steady, as if she was saying she trusted him. From that moment, Daniel knew she was no longer just a lost child in his care. She was becoming family. Days turned into weeks. Daniel taught her simple words in English, pointing at objects and repeating their names. She struggled at first, but her mind was sharper than most children. Soon she could say water, food, and even his name. Though her voice was soft and musical, every time she spoke, Daniel felt something warm stir inside his chest. He gave her a name, Lyra. He did not know her true name, but the sound fit her, light and gentle like the way she moved. She accepted it with a smile, one of the first genuine smiles he had ever seen on her face. It lit up the entire outpost, brighter than any sun. As the months passed, Lyra grew stronger. She learned to help with repairs, carrying tools with small but eager hands. She asked questions with her golden eyes even before she had words for them, and Daniel answered as best he could, showing her how to fix broken panels, how to cook, how to plant small crops in the dusty soil. But there were moments that reminded him she was not like other children. At night, the cloth she carried would glow faintly, filling the room with strange symbols of light. Sometimes, when she was scared or angry, objects around her would tremble and shift as if touched by invisible hands. Daniel told himself it was just tricks of the mind, but deep down he knew Lyra was something more. The colony folk noticed her too when Daniel brought her to the market. Whispers followed. Not human, some muttered. He shouldn't be keeping her. Others watched with curiosity, drawn to her strange beauty and glowing eyes. Daniel ignored them, keeping Lyra close, his hand always on her shoulder. One evening, as the suns dipped low, a traveler passed through the market. He wore dark robes and carried his scanner in his hand. Daniel noticed the man watching Lyra for too long. His gaze sharp and calculating. Unease crawled up Daniel's spine. He left quickly, taking Lyra back to the outpost before the stranger could follow. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He stared at the stars, knowing deep in his heart that someone, somewhere, was searching for the girl. Her golden eyes, her glowing cloth, her strange powers, none of it was ordinary. And if others discovered her, they would take her away. Or worse, he clenched his fists, making a silent promise to himself. No matter who came, no matter what danger followed, he would protect Lyra. She was his child now. In blood or not, the galaxy could call her alien, royal, or whatever secret she truly carried. But to him, she was family outside. The twin suns faded into the horizon. The stars awakened, watching silently as the bond between a human and an alien orphan grew stronger. But far above those stars, unseen, ships moved like hunters in the night. They were still searching, still tracking, and one day they would come. For now, Daniel and Lyra had peace. a fragile peace built on trust, love, and the warmth of a new home. But shadows were already creeping closer, preparing to shatter it, and when they came, nothing in Daniel's quiet life would ever be the same. The colony world slept under the quiet of twin moons, but Daniel did not. He sat by the window of his outpost, his eyes scanning the horizon. Lyra was asleep in her bed, the glowing cloth resting beside her, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Daniel knew something was coming, something bigger than his small life on this forgotten world. He had seen the stranger at the market, the one who had stared too long. Since that day, Daniel felt watched, as if invisible eyes followed him whenever he walked the streets. He told himself it was only paranoia, yet every instinct screamed it was real. The galaxy was not kind, and secrets never stayed hidden forever. Lyra had grown in strength and confidence. Her English was better now, and she laughed more freely. She chased the small creatures that scurried across the colony fields and asked endless questions about the stars. Daniel answered what he could, though sometimes he wondered if she knew more than she let on. One evening, while repairing a broken transmitter, he found Lyra staring at the night sky. Her golden eyes glowed softly as she whispered words he did not understand. When he asked, she only smiled and said, "They are singing." Daniel frowned, uneasy, but he let it go. Perhaps she was imagining things, or perhaps she was remembering something from a past he could never understand. Whispers spread across the colony. Travelers spoke of war and distant systems, of an empire searching for something precious. Rumors told of bounty hunters chasing a child marked with symbols of royalty. Daniel listened silently in the tavern, his hand tightening around his drink. He knew then that Lyra's secret was more dangerous than he feared. Back at the outpost, he tried to keep life normal. He taught Lyra how to grow food in the dry soil, how to fix small engines, how to survive in a world that often demanded too much. But every night, he checked the skies. Sometimes, far in the distance, he saw faint flashes, ships jumping in and out of orbit, too many to be mere traders. He told Lyra they were only stars, but inside he carried the weight of truth. One night, Lyra awoke from a dream, her eyes wide with fear. "The shadows," she whispered, clutching his arm. "They are coming." Daniel held her close, telling her it was only a dream. But his chest felt heavy. The child saw things beyond human sight, and he could not ignore that. A week later, the colony market was quieter than usual. Merchants packed up their stalls early, and travelers hurried through the streets. Daniel noticed a group of armored men questioning locals, showing them a hologram of a child. His blood ran cold, even from a distance. He recognized the golden eyes in the image. It was Lyra. He returned home quickly, his mind racing. When he entered the outpost, Lyra ran to him, sensing his fear. He knelt and placed his hands on her shoulders, looking into her glowing eyes. "Lyra, listen to me," he said firmly. "You must stay hidden, no matter what happens." She nodded slowly, her small face pale but determined. That night, Daniel packed supplies, food, water, tools, and hidden weapons he had hoped never to use. He checked the engines of his ship, making sure it was ready to leave at a moment's notice. Lyra watched silently, clutching the glowing cloth to her chest. She did not ask questions, but Daniel saw the sadness in her eyes. She knew their peaceful days were ending. The next morning, Daniel woke to find Lyra standing outside, staring at the rising suns. The cloth in her hands glowed brighter than before, the symbols shifting like living fire. "What is it?" he asked, stepping beside her. She whispered softly, "They are close." And then, as if to answer her, the sky split with the thunder of engines. 3 ships descended through the clouds, black and silver, their wings sharp like blades. They hovered above the colony, scanning the settlement with beams of light. The people ran in fear, shouting warnings. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her inside, his heart pounding. He had seen ships like these before, hunters, mercenaries, soldiers of the highest bidder. And if they were here, it was for her. The outpost shook as the ships passed overhead. Dust fell from the ceiling, and machines rattled in protest. Lyra clung to him, her golden eyes wide. Daniel tightened his grip on her, his voice firm. "I won't let them take you." He meant it with every fiber of his being. Outside, the colony guards fired weak weapons at the intruders, the hunters. Ignored them, their scanners sweeping the ground, searching, hunting. Daniel knew they would find the outpost soon. He had only one choice left to run. He rushed to the ship, powering up the engines. The old freighter roared to life, trembling as if it knew the danger. Lyra climbed aboard, clutching the cloth tighter than ever. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They will never stop." Daniel met her gaze, his jaw set. "Then we will never stop either," he replied. As the freighter lifted into the night sky, the hunters turned, their scanners locking onto the escaping vessel. Blinding lights filled the cockpit. Alarms screamed, and the chase began. The quiet colony world was left behind. Ahead lay only stars, shadows, and the storm of destiny that neither Daniel nor Lyra could escape. Asterisk. The freighter rattled as it cut through the blackness of space. Engines screamed, alarms flashed, and Daniel fought to keep the ship steady behind them. The hunter vessels followed like shadows, their red lights glowing like eyes of predators. Lyra sat strapped into the co-pilot's chair, clutching the glowing cloth to her chest. Her golden eyes were wide, yet calm, as if she had known this moment would come. "Hold on!" Daniel shouted as he pulled the freighter into a sharp dive. Laser fire streaked past, shaking the hull. The old ship groaned, but somehow held together. Daniel's hands moved with instinct, guiding the vessel between asteroids that glittered like shards of glass. The hunters followed, relentless. Lyra pressed her hands to the glowing cloth, and suddenly the symbols flared with light. The cabin filled with a golden glow, and the ship's systems flickered strangely. The scanners that had been failing lit up with clarity, showing paths through the asteroid field Daniel had never seen before. He glanced at her in shock, but she only whispered, "This way." Daniel followed the new path, weaving through the rocks, and for the first time, the hunters fell back, confused when they finally broke free of the asteroid belt. The hunters were gone, at least for now. Daniel leaned back, sweat dripping down his forehead. His hands trembled as he looked at Lyra, who still clutched the cloth. The symbols had dimmed, but the faint light remained. "What is that thing?" he asked, his voice sharp with fear and wonder. Lyra looked down at the cloth, her small fingers tracing the glowing patterns. "It belonged to my mother," she whispered, her English halting but clear. Daniel froze, surprised she had never spoken of her family before. "Your mother?" he asked carefully. Lyra nodded, her golden eyes shining. "She said it would protect me until I return." Daniel frowned, his heart pounding. "Return where? Who are you, Lyra?" He pressed. For a long moment, the girl was silent, staring at the stars outside. Then slowly, the cloth in her hands shifted, its symbols glowing brighter. The light rose into the air, forming shapes. A figure appeared, a tall alien woman, regal and fierce, her eyes golden like Lyra's, her voice echoing through the cabin. "My daughter," the hologram said. "If you are seeing this, then the shadows have taken me, and you are alone." Daniel's breath caught, his eyes fixed on the shimmering figure. The woman's voice was filled with sorrow and strength. "You are Lyra Vera, heir to the Solari throne, the last light of our people." Daniel's world tilted, the words crashing into him like thunder. He looked at the child beside him, no longer just an orphan, no longer just a lost soul. She was royalty, a princess of a powerful alien empire. And the hunters who chased them were not random mercenaries. They were sent by those who wanted the throne. The hologram continued, "Trust no one but those who prove their heart. For many will seek to use you, destroy you, or bend you to their will." Her golden eyes softened as she looked at Lyra. "But remember, my child, you are never alone, for our blood carries the fire of the stars." The light faded. The hologram dissolving back into the glowing cloth, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of the engines. Daniel sat frozen, struggling to breathe. He had raised this child, taught her, fed her, loved her like his own. But all this time, he had been caring for a princess whose name could shake the galaxy. Lyra turned to him, her small face serious beyond her years. "You are not afraid?" she asked softly. Daniel blinked, then gave a bitter laugh. "Of course I'm afraid," he admitted. "But not of you, Lyra." He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "You're still the same child I found on that battlefield. The same one I promised to protect." Her golden eyes shimmered, and for the first time since the chase began, she smiled faintly. But Daniel's thoughts raced. If she was heir to a throne, then powerful forces were already hunting her. The hunters would not stop, not until they had captured or killed her. And now, by choosing to protect her, he had become their enemy too. The freighter's warning system beeped suddenly, pulling him from his thoughts. Another ship had locked onto their trail. Closing in fast, Daniel cursed under his breath. Pushing the engines harder, the freighter shuddered, barely holding together under the strain. "We can't keep running forever," he muttered. Lyra placed her hand over his, her small fingers steady. "We don't run," she said firmly. "We fight." Daniel looked at her in disbelief, but the fire in her golden eyes reminded him of the hologram. She was young, but inside her burned the strength of a queen. The weight of destiny rested on her shoulders, yet she carried it with surprising courage. He realized then that she was no longer just an orphan needing protection. She was becoming something more, and he would have to become more too, outside. The stars blurred as the freighter raced through space, hunted by shadows. Inside, the truth had been revealed, changing everything. Daniel no longer traveled with a lost child. He traveled with the future of an empire, and together, they would face whatever storm the galaxy prepared for them. The freighter streaked across the void, leaving trails of broken light behind. Daniel's hands gripped the controls as if his life depended on it, and in truth, it did. The hunters were closing in again, their sleek ships cutting through the stars with deadly precision. The old freighter rattled and shook, each alarm a reminder that it was never built for war. Lyra sat beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the screen. Her small hands clutched the cloth, and every so often, the symbols flickered with strange energy. "Can we outrun them?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos. Daniel shook his head. "Not for long. This ship's too slow." His mind raced, searching for options, but the galaxy offered little mercy. Suddenly, the hunters fired, red beams slashing past the HULL. Metal screamed as the freighter shuddered under the impact. Sparks flew from the console, and smoke filled the cabin. Daniel cursed, forcing the ship into a sharp dive, weaving between fragments of rock drifting through space. The hunters followed with ease, their engines roaring like predators on the hunt. "Hold tight," Daniel shouted, pulling the freighter toward a nearby asteroid belt. The massive stones spun slowly, colliding with one another, creating fields of deadly debris. Most pilots avoided such places, but Daniel knew he had no choice. He plunged the ship into the storm of rock, the hull rattling as boulders scraped past. Behind them, the hunters followed. Undeterred inside, Lyra closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent words Daniel could not understand. The cloth in her hands glowed brighter, and suddenly, the ship's sensors cleared, showing safe paths through the chaos. Daniel blinked in disbelief, but followed the path without hesitation. They darted between crashing asteroids, slipped through narrow tunnels of stone. Each second felt like an eternity, but somehow they survived. One of the hunter ships was not so lucky. A massive rock crushed its hull, tearing it apart in a burst of fire. Lyra's eyes opened, and she gasped as if the destruction had shaken her too. Daniel spared her a glance, then returned his focus to the chase. "Two left," he muttered, "and they won't make the same mistake." The freighter burst free of the asteroid field, its engines screaming, The hunters emerged behind them. Relentless, their weapons charging again. Daniel slammed his fist on the console. "We need more speed, or we're finished." The cloth pulsed once more, and Lyra whispered, "Trust me." Before he could reply, she pressed her hands to the FIB console, and light spread across the ship. The old freighter jolted, its failing engine suddenly roaring with new power. The stars outside blurred as the ship surged forward faster than Daniel had ever seen. He gritted his teeth, holding the controls steady as the vessel nearly tore itself apart. Behind them, the hunters struggled to keep up, their scanners losing. The trail, for a moment, hope flickered in Daniel's chest, but hope was fragile. And the galaxy was cruel. A larger ship appeared from hyperspace ahead, its dark hull bristling with weapons. It was no mere hunter, it was a warship waiting. Like a spider in its web, Daniel's heart sank. "They set a trap," he growled. Lyra's grip on the cloth tightened, her golden eyes blazing. "We can't stop now." The warship opened fire, beams of energy cutting across the void. Daniel swerved, the freighter shaking violently as bolts scorched the hull. Alarms screamed louder, the engines crackled, and smoke filled the cabin once more. Lyra stood, her small frame trembling, yet her voice firm. "Let me try." Daniel looked at her, panic rising. "What do you mean?" "You're just a child." She placed both hands on the glowing cloth, and the symbols flared so brightly it hurt to look at them. A golden field of light spread around the freighter, shimmering like a shield. The next blast from the warship struck the field and broke apart, scattering harmlessly into the void. Daniel's eyes widened in awe and fear. How are you doing this?" Lyra's voice shook, but her gaze was steady. "It's not me, it's who I am." The hunters regrouped, circling like wolves, but the golden shield held strong. For the first time, Daniel felt they might survive. He pushed the freighter forward, aiming for a nearby jump gate. If they could reach it, they could escape into hyperspace, vanish into the endless stars. But the warship was not done. It unleashed a storm of missiles, dozens of them streaking toward the freighter. The shield flared, cracking under the impact, and Lyra cried out, collapsing against the console. Daniel caught her, his voice desperate. "Stay with me, Lyra. Don't give up now." The cloth dimmed, the shield faltering, the missiles closed in, ready to tear them apart. With one last surge of will, Lyra pressed her hands to the cloth again. A pulse of golden energy exploded outward, consuming the missiles in blinding light. The hunters were thrown back, their systems fried, their ships drifting powerless. The warship staggered, its weapons silenced for the moment, and the freighter shot forward, diving into the jump gate just as the shield collapsed inside the cabin. Daniel held the unconscious child in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, her small body drained by the power she had unleashed. He brushed the hair from her face, whispering, "You're safe. I've got you." But deep inside, he knew safety was only an illusion. They had escaped the hunters, but the truth was out now. The galaxy would never stop chasing her. As the freighter vanished into the tunnel of hyperspace, Daniel looked down at the girl he had raised. She was not just his child anymore, not just an orphan. She was a princess, a warrior, a spark of destiny that could either save or destroy entire worlds, and he had sworn to protect her, no matter what it cost. Asterisk. The freighter drifted through hyperspace, the golden glow of the jump tunnel painting the cabin walls. Daniel sat with Lyra resting against his chest, her breathing shallow but steady. She had not woken since the battle, her small hands still clutching the faded cloth. Daniel brushed the hair from her face, his mind heavy with questions. How long could she keep using this strange power before it consumed her? When the freighter emerged from hyperspace, Daniel expected empty stars, maybe another lonely colony. Instead, a massive fleet filled the void. Dozens of warships hung in formation, their silver hulls gleaming with banners of blue and gold. Daniel's heart froze, his hand tightening on the controls. This was no band of hunters. This was an empire. Before he could turn away, the CUM system crackled to life. Unidentified. "Vessel, power down your engines," a deep voice ordered. "You are entering Shalari royal space." Daniel's eyes widened, his breath catching. Shalari, the very name carried weight. Stories of an empire older than most human colonies. And Lyra's blood, her glowing eyes, her strange power, all of it tied to them. The freighter jolted as a tractor beam locked onto its hull, dragging it toward the largest ship in the fleet. Daniel tried to resist, but the controls were useless. He looked at Lyra, still unconscious, and whispered, "What have you pulled me into, kid?" Moments later, the freighter docked inside a vast hangar, its metal belly glowing with golden light. Armed guards surrounded them as the hatch opened. Weapons aimed, Daniel stepped out carefully, carrying Lyra in his arms. He expected hostility. Chains, maybe even execution, but instead, the guards froze, their eyes widening as they saw the child. Then as one, they dropped to one knee, their heads bowed low. A ripple of voices filled the hangar. "The princess lives," Daniel stared, stunned. He looked down at Lyra, who stirred faintly in his arms, her golden eyes blinking open. Confusion crossed her face as she saw the kneeling soldiers. What are they doing?" She whispered weakly. Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. "They're bowing to you, Lyra." A tall figure approached, clad in regal armor marked with symbols of command. He removed his helmet, revealing silver hair and stern golden eyes. He looked at Lyra with awe, then at Daniel with suspicion. "You brought her back," the man said, his voice low. "Do you even know who she is?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "I know enough," he replied, holding her closer. The commander nodded slowly, his gaze softening as he bowed his head. "She is Princess Lyra Vera, heir to the Solari throne. Lost to us since the war, her return is the hope we thought we'd never see." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Daniel felt the weight of destiny pressing down. He had raised her as his child, but now the galaxy wanted her as their queen. The soldiers escorted them through shining halls of the flagship. Golden banners lined the walls, and statues of ancient rulers watched with cold eyes. Everywhere they walked, soldiers and attendants stopped to bow before Lyra. The child clung to Daniel's arm, her eyes filled with both wonder and fear. She had dreamed of belonging, of family, yet now the truth pressed against her like a crown too heavy to bear. They entered a grand chamber, the throne room of the Shalari fleet. At its center stood a throne of crystal and gold, glowing faintly with the same light as the cloth. Lyra stared at it, trembling. The commander gestured for her to approach. "It is yours, princess." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Only if you want it." Lyra looked at him, then at the throne, then back at the soldiers who waited silently. Her voice was small but clear. "I don't want a throne. I want my home. I want my family." The commander's face softened, though sorrow shadowed his eyes. "You are both, princess," he said gently. "You are family to your people, and your people need you." Daniel felt her hand squeeze his tightly. She turned back to the throne, her golden eyes glowing brighter. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then she stepped forward and placed the glowing cloth on the throne. Symbols flared, filling the room with golden light. The soldiers gasped, their voices rising. "The heir has returned. The fire lives again." The light spread across the fleet, awakening long-dormant systems. It was as if the Empire itself recognized her return. Daniel shielded his eyes, but when the glow faded, he saw Lyra standing taller, her shoulders straighter, though still a child. She now carried the weight of her birthright. And yet, when she looked back at him, her eyes held the same trust as before. Later, in the quiet of her new chambers, Lyra sat beside Daniel. She leaned against him, whispering, "Do I have to be a princess now?" Daniel sighed, wrapping an arm around her. "You don't have to be anything you don't want to be." She smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm still your daughter first." His throat tightened, and he pulled her closer, knowing the galaxy might not let them keep it that simple. Outside the flagship, stars burned bright, but so did the fires of rebellion. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. The princess had returned. For some, it was hope; for others, a threat. And as Daniel held Lyra close, he knew this was only the beginning. The hunters would not stop. The shadows would grow darker, and soon, the war would come to their very door. The fleet drifted across the stars, banners of blue and gold shining proudly from every ship. Inside the royal flagship, Lyra walked through the grand halls, her steps light but steady. Everywhere she went, soldiers and nobles bowed, their voices whispering her name like a prayer. Daniel followed close behind, his eyes watchful, his hand never far from the blaster at his belt. To the Solari, she was their princess. Their hope returned from the ashes. To Daniel, she was still the frightened child he had carried from a battlefield. But the galaxy saw something else, an heir who could unite or destroy entire worlds. The weight of it all pressed on his shoulders as much as hers. That night, a council gathered in the throne chamber. Commanders, nobles, and advisors filled the room, their faces grave. The rebellion was growing stronger, entire star systems rising against the Solari Empire. The news carried whispers of traitors, mercenaries, and warlords rallying to a single banner. The enemy will not rest until the princess is theirs, one general declared, or until she is dead. Lyra sat on the throne, small against its towering frame. Her golden eyes studied the council, her hands gripping the glowing cloth. "I will not hide," she said softly, yet her voice carried strength. "If my people fight, then I will fight with them." The room fell silent, shocked by the resolve in her words. Daniel stepped forward, his voice firm. "She is still a child." The council turned on him with narrowed eyes. "And who are you?" One noble sneered. "A human scavenger, daring to speak in the Hall of Kings?" Daniel stood tall, meeting their gaze without fear. "I'm the one who kept her alive when no one else would," he said sharply. "I'm the one she trusts." Lyra's voice cut through the tension, calm but unyielding. "He is my protector, and he stays." The nobles murmured among themselves, but none dared to challenge her. Daniel bowed his head slightly to her, pride and worry twisting together inside him. He had never sought honor or titles, yet now he stood at the heart of an empire, not as a ruler, but as the guardian of one. The days that followed were filled with preparation. The fleet mobilized, weapons readied, alliances forged in haste. Daniel trained with the Solari soldiers, learning their tactics while also teaching them human tricks of survival. Lyra studied with advisors, her sharp mind absorbing lessons of history, diplomacy, and war. At night, though, she always returned to Daniel, whispering her fears, seeking comfort only he could give. Then came the day the rebellion arrived. A massive armada tore into Solari space, black banners of defiance fluttering across their hulls. The enemy demanded surrender, their message cold and final: deliver the princess or be destroyed. Lyra stood on the command deck beside Daniel, a glowing cloth draped across her shoulders like a mantle. Her golden eyes burned with determination. "We will not surrender," she declared. "Not today, not ever." Her voice carried across the fleet, filling every soldier with fire. Daniel felt it too, an energy that was more than blood, more than royalty. It was the spark of hope. The battle began, the void lit with fire and steel. The Solari fleet fought bravely, their ships blazing against the tide of rebels. Daniel manned the freighter, flying beside the royal squadrons. It was strange, this battered ship of his now flying as part of an empire's army. Lyra guided him, her vision showing paths through the chaos. Together, they struck where the enemy was weakest, turning the tide again and again. But the enemy was vast, and their leader was cunning. A massive dreadnought emerged from the shadows, bristling with cannons, its presence alone enough to make the fleet tremble. The rebel commander's voice echoed across Cums. "The throne is ours, the child will fall." Lyra's small hands tightened on the console, her face pale but fierce. "Not while I still breathe." Daniel flew straight at the dreadnought. Dodging fire that could split planets, the freighter shook, panels ripped loose, alarms screamed. "Are you insane?" One Shalari commander shouted over the comms. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Probably. But it's the only shot we've got." Lyra stood in the cockpit, her hands on the glowing cloth. Symbols blazed brighter than ever, filling the cabin with golden fire. The freighter became more than metal. It became an arrow of light, a weapon forged from courage and destiny. Together, they plunged straight into the heart of the dreadnought. The golden light erupted, shattering through the rebel flagship, tearing its engines apart. The explosion echoed across the void, a burst of brilliance that blinded even the stars. When the light cleared, the dreadnought was broken. Its fleet scattered, the rebels fled. Their courage shattered by the fire of the princes returned. In the aftermath, silence fell across the fleet. Then, slowly, voices rose, chants of "Lyra, Lyra." Echoing from ship to ship, the princess stood tall, the cloth glowing faintly on her shoulders, her eyes shining with tears. She turned to Daniel, her voice breaking. "We did it," he smiled, weary but proud. "No, kid, you did it." But the truth was deeper. It had not been a princess alone, nor a human alone. It was the bond between them, the orphan and the wanderer, the protector and the heir. That bond had changed the fate of a galaxy. In the days that followed, peace returned. Though fragile, the Solari Empire rebuilt, its people united by the return of their heir. Daniel stood always at her side, not as a king, not as a soldier, but as family. When nobles questioned his place, Lyra only answered with one truth: "He is my father." And so, a human who once walked alone among ruins now walked the halls of royalty. A child who had been an orphan now sat on a throne, her hand always reaching for the man who saved her. Together, they faced a galaxy still filled with shadows. But whatever came, they would face it not as strangers, not as ruler and servant, but as father and daughter, bound by love stronger than blood. The stars shone bright outside the royal fleet. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. The war was not over. Peace was not certain. But for this moment, they had won. And for him, that was enough. Asterisk.